My name's Max. I'm 28, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the ghost in my own family. You know the type, the one nobody remembers to text, the guy who somehow gets cropped out of group photos, the backup driver or favor guy who's only useful when somebody needs something, but never invited when it really counts. I grew up with a mom who had a tongue sharp enough to cut glass and a memory that worked only when it came to my screw-ups. She could list every mistake I ever made, yet she always managed to forget the good stuff, like the awards I brought home, the times I helped her out, or the birthday cards I saved up money to buy. Then there's my sister, Claire. She figured out early that perfection paid dividends. She smiled, batted her eyelashes, nailed her grades, and got treated like royalty. Meanwhile, I was the opposite, quiet, skeptical, a little too blunt for my own good. And in our family, that didn't fly. In their world, fake smiles were as good as cash, and honesty was treated like a nuisance. For years, I kept trying to earn my spot. I'd show up with pies to dinners I wasn't even invited to, drag along gifts to birthdays where nobody noticed I had arrived, and hand out compliments to relatives who couldn't even pronounce my name right. In the beginning, I honestly believed if I just worked hard enough at it, they'd eventually notice me. But by the time I hit 25, the illusion was gone. I finally understood that no matter what I did, my seat at that table was never guaranteed. Still, that kind of rejection leaves a mark. Even when your head knows better, your chest still aches in places logic can't reach. So when Thanksgiving rolled around last year, I went back and forth about whether I should even bother. The only real reason I considered it was my cousin Lily. She's 2 years younger than me, but more grounded and emotionally grown than half the adults in that house. Over the years, she and I had built our own little bond. Late-night calls, honest check-ins, random DMs. She was one of the few who actually saw me. The day before Thanksgiving, she texted me, "You better show up. I saved you a spot." And just like that, I caved. I told myself, if not for them, at least for her, it might be worth it. So I made the 40-minute drive out to my uncle's place, the same house that had hosted every Thanksgiving since forever. Classic suburban setup, perfectly trimmed lawn, an inflatable turkey wobbling in the yard, and that heavy holiday smell of butter, spices, and unspoken tension drifting out the windows. I parked 3 houses down, like always, since the driveway was packed whenever I showed up late. I grabbed a bottle of wine I knew nobody would drink and walked up the steps. Through the screen door, I saw them, my mom, my aunt, my sister, my uncle, all laughing and smiling like they were in a photo shoot for Dysfunctional Families Anonymous. I wasn't expecting a grand welcome or even a quick hello. But what happened next, it wasn't just cold. It was calculated. Right as I reached for the knob, the door cracked open, and there was my Uncle Mark, blocking the entire frame like some human barricade. No smile, no greeting. Just that smug little smirk tugging at his mouth as he said, "You're not family anymore, Max. You need to leave." For a second, I thought he was messing with me. I actually laughed, waiting for the punchline. But he didn't budge. And over his shoulder, I saw my mom sliding 2 plates across the table. One of them had the name card I instantly recognized, mine. She handed it off, giggling, to Claire's boyfriend, a guy I'd only met twice. Then they clinked their glasses together like it was the funniest thing in the world. My chair, my spot at that table, was already filled before I'd even set foot inside. Uncle Mark didn't hesitate. "I'm serious," he said flatly. "You being here just stirs up tension." I blinked at him, almost laughing at how absurd it sounded. Tension? I haven't even walked in yet. He gave this fake, pitying shrug, like he was doing me a favor. "Let's not make this uglier than it has to be. Just head home, okay?" I glanced past his shoulder and locked eyes with my mom. She didn't flinch, didn't wave him off, didn't even pretend to defend me. She just lifted an eyebrow and took a slow sip of her wine, like she was watching some mildly interesting scene on TV. For a split second, I thought about pushing back, raising my voice, forcing my way in, making it impossible for them to ignore me. But I didn't. Instead, I surprised myself. I stayed calm. I nodded, stepped back, and turned around. Bottle of wine still clutched in my hand, I walked down those steps, slid into my car, and drove 2 blocks before pulling over. My hands weren't shaking with anger. They were trembling with something colder, something final. In that moment, it hit me. I wasn't family to them. Not really. I was just the placeholder, the punchline, the scapegoat they dusted off when they needed someone to criticize. And when they didn't, I was nothing more than an empty chair. But here's the part they didn't know. I'd been planning for this. For months, I'd been quietly preparing for the day I stopped begging for a place at their table. Lily and I had whispered about it more than once, late at night, trading stories about being overlooked and dismissed. She wasn't as vocal as I was, but she saw it too. The hypocrisy, the favoritism, the manipulation baked into every family gathering. I remember her saying, if we ever really wanted to break the illusion, all it would take is one spark. So, sitting there in my car, I pulled out my phone and opened the draft I'd been fine-tuning for weeks. It wasn't angry, it wasn't a guilt trip, it wasn't some messy rant. It was just the raw truth, laid out clean and simple, and I sent it off to a carefully chosen handful of people sitting inside that house. 5 minutes later, with my engine idling at the corner of the street, I saw the fallout begin in my rearview mirror. The front door burst open. Lily was the first out, her face red with fury. Then came my cousin Josh, his girlfriend right behind him, and even my aunt's best friend, the one who always brought dessert and had a soft spot for me. One by one, they filed out. I couldn't hear the shouting inside, but I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was unraveling. The illusion was cracking wide open, and this was only the start. My phone lit up before I'd even pulled away. Lily, I answered, my chest thudding, not from nerves, but from the sheer speed of how fast it all escalated. Max, she snapped, skipping any greeting. What did you just do? I hesitated. You read it. Of course I read it. We all did. Uncle Mark's face turned purple. Your mom tried to play dumb. And Claire just stood there frozen, like she didn't know what planet she was on. Through the line, I could hear the wind rushing by. She was walking fast, maybe pacing, maybe heading to her car. She went quiet for a beat, then her voice dropped low. Why didn't you tell me you were recording them? And that was the kicker. See, months back, after years of being talked down to, lied about, and gaslit, I finally got tired of playing defense. So I started collecting receipts. Not out of paranoia, but because I was done letting them rewrite history. I'd been gathering proof for months. Casual conversations recorded on my phone. Screenshots of texts I knew they'd try to deny later. Video clips, like the one of my mom telling Claire she should just go ahead and take credit for something I'd done. A voice memo of Uncle Mark saying I only showed up at family events to freeload, even though I'd never asked him or anyone for a damn thing. But maybe the hardest one to keep was from my own birthday the year before. An audio recording where they forgot I was even sitting at the table. My birthday. Me. Right there, invisible. So when I hit send on that Thanksgiving message, it wasn't just words on a screen. It was a 5-minute highlight reel of every lie, every dig, every piece of hypocrisy I'd been forced to swallow over the years. It had context, it had timestamps, and it had those long, heavy silences between the insults that made the cruelty echo even louder. I'd chosen my audience carefully. 7 people. Lily, Josh, my Aunt Susan, my cousin's fiancé, my mom's sister, the one who never quite picked a side, and 2 family friends who always swallowed the polished version of our family that my mom and Uncle Mark sold to anyone who would listen. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you stuck in the middle, I said quietly into the phone. Lily let out a sharp laugh. Max, I've always been in the middle, but I'm glad you did it. I finally let go of the death grip I'd had on the steering wheel. You okay? I will be, she said. I'm done with them. Click. I sat there in my car, the silence pressing in. Through the windshield, I watched as more cars pulled away from the house. A handful of relatives lingered on the porch, their faces puzzled. My mom's voice rose above the rest, shrill and sharp, though I couldn't make out the words. I didn't need to. I'd been hearing versions of her tirades my whole life. Then my phone rang again. Aunt Susan. Max, she gasped, almost out of breath. Where are you? I thought about lying. Down the street, I finally said. Stay there. I'm coming. She hung up before I could answer. 5 minutes later, she slid into my passenger seat. Her eyes were wide, but it wasn't anger. It was the look of someone who just stumbled into a crime scene they never imagined was real. I listened to everything, she said. Twice, just like that. I didn't respond. I never knew it was that bad. I mean, I knew they could be cruel sometimes, but I didn't realize how calculated it was. You really didn't know? I asked. She winced. I saw bits and pieces, but your mom always made it sound like you were the problem. She said you were dramatic, that you twisted things. I didn't want to believe she'd lie. She didn't lie, I said softly. She edited. Aunt Susan stared at the dashboard for a long moment. This is going to rip the family apart. Then maybe it was already broken, I told her. That night, I went home to a flood of messages. Some furious, some apologizing, a few confused, asking for explanations. But the silence from 3 people cut the deepest: my mom, Claire, and Uncle Mark. Not a word. No calls, no texts. Nothing. Until the next morning. That's when I saw the post. My mom, in classic performance mode, had taken to Facebook. A long, dramatic status about betrayal, about misunderstandings, about private family matters being dragged out for attention. She never said my name, but the comments section made it crystal clear who she was pointing at. People flooded my mom's post with sympathy. They called me ungrateful, disrespectful. A few even wrote lines like, "You raised him better than that, girl." But then something unexpected happened. Lily jumped into the comments. So did Josh. And right after that, Aunt Susan chimed in. One by one, others started speaking up. They called out the manipulation, the double standards, even shared their own memories of being lied to or pushed aside. The whole thread blew up. Some relatives deleted what they'd written. A few blocked me altogether. But the tide had shifted. For the first time, I wasn't standing alone. People were finally seeing it too. That weekend, I got a message request from Claire's boyfriend. It read, "I didn't know they were like that. I'm sorry. If I'd known what I was walking into, I never would have sat in your chair." I didn't bother replying. I didn't need to. The real message, the one that mattered, had already been sent. Not just in the group chat, but in the cracks spreading through the family. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost drifting through someone else's story. I felt like the author. And my story? It wasn't done yet. That Sunday, a knock at my door pulled me out of the quiet. I live in a small apartment above a bakery in a quiet part of town. Nothing fancy, just the smell of cinnamon rolls every morning and a kind of peace I never had growing up. I wasn't expecting visitors. Most of my friends had already texted after the video made the rounds, some supportive, some shocked. Lily called me every day, but I wasn't prepared for who I saw when I opened the door. My dad. We hadn't spoken in almost a year. He looked older than I remembered, more gray threading through his beard, that old leather jacket looking more worn. He stood there rocking on his heels, hands shoved into his pockets, like he wasn't sure what to do with himself. "Hi," he muttered. "Didn't expect to see you," I said, stepping aside, though I can't say I was exactly welcoming. He hesitated, then finally walked in. I watched him take in the place, clean, quiet, full of small things that actually made me happy. The record collection on the shelf, the stack of books, a framed photo of Lily and me from that one Thanksgiving we skipped out on the circus and got burgers instead. "I saw the video," he said finally. "Or parts of it. Your aunt sent it." I waited. He lowered himself onto the edge of the couch, staring at the floor like it held answers he couldn't reach. "Your mom," he sighed. "She's been losing her mind over this. Says you set her up. Says you twisted everything." I leaned against the counter. "Did I?" He didn't answer right away. "I don't know, Max. I knew things were bad between you two, but hearing it like that, it was hard to listen to." "Hard for who?" I asked, arms crossed. He finally looked up at me. "Hard for me, because it made me realize I let it happen for years." And there it was. The first real thing my father had ever said that felt like a reflection instead of a dismissal. I stayed quiet. For once, silence said enough. I didn't trust myself to answer right away, so I stayed quiet. My dad shifted on the couch, searching for something to say. "You remember when you were 13, and your mom threw out your art portfolio?" I nodded slowly. That memory was burned into me. Months of drawings, gone in an instant, tossed into the trash because I brought home an A- in science. "Yeah," I said. "She told me you'd drawn something disrespectful. I drew a cartoon of her yelling at me. That was it." He let out a dry, humorless laugh. I believed her. Never even asked to see it. "That was the pattern," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "She'd say something, and you'd nod. Claire would play along, and I'd be left wondering if I was crazy or just not worth the truth." For a moment, he looked like he wanted to push back, but he didn't. He just nodded slightly, letting the silence stretch between us. "I can't fix what happened," he said finally. "But I wanted you to know, I see it now. I wish I'd spoken up sooner. I wish I'd stepped in." And I believed him. But part of me also knew that regret doesn't erase years of silence. He hadn't been cruel, but he'd been complicit. I appreciate you saying that, I told him. But I don't know what you want from me. He sighed. I don't know either. I guess. I just wanted to see how you're doing. I'm doing better, I said honestly. Now that I'm out of it. Now that I've stopped pretending they'll ever change. He nodded again. They're already planning damage control. Of course they are. They think if they wait it out, people will move on. I raised an eyebrow. And will they? He looked tired, older. Some already have. Some are scared to pick sides. But a few they're furious. Especially about the money. Ah, the money. The part one hadn't mentioned outside that original message. For years, I'd been quietly bailing family members out, helping with rent, car repairs, even giving Claire a loan once when she swore she needed to leave her abusive boyfriend. I never asked for repayment, never told anyone. I did it because, deep down, I thought maybe buying their stability would finally buy me a place at the table. But 3 months ago, I stopped. I just shifted my support to Lily, to friends, to people who treated me like I mattered. In the video I sent, I included a note at the end. This is why I stopped paying for your lives. And apparently, that line cut deeper than all the audio clips. They're saying you're punishing them, my dad said. They punish themselves, I replied. I just stopped rewarding it. He didn't argue. After a long pause, he stood. I should go? I just wanted you to know you were right. About all of it. He made it halfway to the door, then stopped and turned. If there's ever a way back, for us, I hope you'll let me take it. And then he left. I didn't rage. I just stood in the quiet of my apartment, waiting. Because I knew this wasn't over. My mom never let go of power that easily. Claire never handled humiliation well. Thanksgiving might have been the match, but Christmas was the real tinderbox. And if they thought they could just sweep it all under the rug, they had another thing coming. I wasn't done. By December, the silence was loud enough to choke on. The family group chat, normally buzzing with potluck assignments and Aunt Carol's recycled memes, was dead. The last message in there was mine. Let me know when you're ready to take some accountability. Nothing but crickets after that. And of course, I wasn't invited to Christmas. Didn't need the invite either. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was missing out. No more forcing a smile while Claire's career got paraded around like she'd cured cancer, while mine was treated like a hobby. No more listening to my mom laugh at digs made at my expense, or Uncle Mark muttering that I'd always been sensitive, like I was a broken appliance. I was free now. Free from obligation, free from expectation, free from carrying the weight of being the family's favorite punching bag. But here's the thing, I wasn't finished. That recording I sent out on Thanksgiving, that was just the opening shot. Sure, it cracked their perfect image and forced them into uncomfortable conversations, but it didn't change them. They were laying low, licking their wounds, waiting for the storm to blow over. I knew that smug belief of theirs, that I'd fade into the background, that they'd eventually rewrite the story and cast me as the bitter black sheep again. So I made sure they couldn't. I started with the money. Quiet. Methodical. No warnings. First was Claire. That $3,000 I'd floated her years back. She'd called it an emergency escape fund to leave her abusive boyfriend. The same boyfriend who showed up in my seat at Thanksgiving, laughing with my mom. I had my lawyer draft a letter. Repayment due in 60 days. No threats, no interest, just a neat little paper trail. Next was Uncle Mark. Every November, like clockwork, I'd been covering part of his property taxes. He never asked outright, too proud for that, but he'd dropped hints years ago, and I'd stepped in. For years, I kept sending the money. Not this December. On the 3rd, his bank sent him the decline notice. And then came my mom. She was the big one. 4 or 5 straight years, I'd been making the payments on her car lease. Never got a thank you. Never even got acknowledgement. She treated it like a duty, her due, as though it was simply what I owed her for being her son. What she didn't realize was the car was still in my name. On December 10th, I repossessed it. That's when the phone calls came in, one after another. Claire first, shrill, screeching, furious. Then Uncle Mark, trying to play the reasonable elder, talking to me like I was a sulking kid. And finally, my mother. She didn't scream. She just said, calm as ever, "So, this is who you really are?" And I told her, "No, this is who you made me become." Then I hung up. Christmas Eve didn't find me sitting alone. I spent it with Lily and a handful of our friends. We cooked dinner together in her apartment, lit a few candles, played board games, and swapped gifts. It was the warmest holiday I'd had in years. Around midnight, Lily poured us both a glass of wine and curled up beside me on the floor, pulling a blanket over our legs. "They called me," she said quietly. "Let me guess," I muttered. "Damage control." She nodded. "Your mom said I was choosing sides, that I was tearing the family apart." "You are," I told her. "The part that needed tearing down." She also said something else, that she was going to set the record straight. I sighed. Of course she did. And the next morning, I saw what she meant. Another Facebook post. Another polished attempt at rewriting the script. She wrote about how families go through hard times, how private pain sometimes becomes public, how certain members can be easily manipulated by false narratives. It was a masterclass in denial, slick, vague, and carefully worded to pull sympathy from anyone who only knew the version of her she'd been polishing for years. I didn't respond, didn't comment, didn't need to. Aunt Susan made her own post, short but cutting. Sometimes the only way to fix a broken family is to stop pretending it isn't broken. "Proud of you, Max." Then Josh dropped a screenshot of an old text from my mom, one she'd sent him right after I helped pay for his college books, badmouthing me. His caption was brutal in its simplicity. We all saw it. We just didn't want to admit it. And then the dam broke. Cousins, old family friends, even one of Claire's college roommates started commenting, messaging, reaching out. People I hadn't spoken to in years were apologizing, telling me they'd seen cracks, but never realized how deep they ran. A week after Christmas, a letter showed up in my mailbox. Handwritten. From my mom. It wasn't an apology. She accused me of destroying the family's reputation, of making enemies I couldn't afford, and said there would be consequences for embarrassing people in public. It read less like a mother's words, and more like the last gasp of someone who'd lost control and didn't know how to get it back. I folded it once, dropped it straight into the trash. I didn't need to fight her anymore. The truth was doing the work for me. By New Year's Eve, the family had split clean down the middle. Some clung to the old story, defending my mom, claiming the recordings were out of context, brushing off every ugly thing as drama. But others had opened their eyes. Those people started building their own circles, their own gatherings. In January, Lily hosted a brunch and invited only the ones she trusted. More than 20 people showed up. Uncle Mark wasn't one of them. Neither was Claire. Neither was my mom. And that's when it really hit me. I wasn't just grieving the family I never truly had. I was mourning the version of myself who had spent years waiting for scraps of love dressed up as approval. That old version of me. The kid who kept apologizing, who twisted himself into knots just to be seen, who thought validation was the same thing as affection. I let him go. Buried him right alongside the guilt, the people-pleasing, the endless ache of wanting to belong. And in that funeral, something better was born. I picked up my pen again, started writing like I hadn't since high school. I built a small freelance business from the ground up. Lily and I are closer than ever. Solid, steady, real. Sometimes the bravest act isn't fighting to get back inside. It's standing at the door they slammed in your face, turning around, and never looking back. And in the quiet that followed, for the first time in my life, I finally heard my own voice. Clear, steady, unapologetic.